let's have a collective effort. So that is another part of strategic alliance, and that strategic alliance is a long-term strategy. And they have been successful in the last 6 years to develop a new chip technology, but again, it's so difficult in a consortium because the diversity is very, very wide. You have IBM, you have Texas Instruments, everybody has their own corporate culture, thinking, the way they deal with products. So it is successful, but not all that. The second example was US Memories. US Memories was also a project started in 1989 by the US government. All the chip companies got right time, right price, and right place. See, in marketing we use 4 P's. It's a universal concept. We say that you must have the right product, right place, distribution, right price, and right promotion. That's why we say 4 P's. Product, price, place, and promotion. You can use the same 4 P's in your international marketing, but one thing will be different over there. That is, your strategies are going to be different. You can't use the same strategies what you use in this country. Suppose if you are selling basmati rice, the way you sell basmati rice in Pakistan, you don't sell it in the US. And that's why the main buyer of your basmati rice, who's that person? Mostly Middle Eastern countries. Dubai, Kuwait, all these. Why? You still are not successful in terms of penetrating or getting into the American market. Why? Because they really don't eat that sort of basmati rice. And look what happened in the last 40 years. First time Japan allowed people to export rice to Japan. So Japan is going to export about 2% of their rice consumption this year. And by 1998 their consumption may go beyond 8%. Why? Because they had some crop problems and all these things. So these are all the different options, different methodologies, different areas, and different techniques in international marketing. As I said before, international marketing, it's a growing area, it's a booming area. By the year 2000, the world trade is going to go beyond $15 trillion. Some people say 10 trillion, some people say 15. I will use my conservative methodology. I will stay between 10 and 15 because we have to wait and see. Although your world trade in some areas is already, total trade is about $6 trillion. And the booming areas are consumer-oriented society and especially services sector. Most of the global economy is based on the services sector, and most of you know what services sector is. Transportation, banking, retailing, insurance, all the retailers, all the credit cards, all these things. It's part of the services sector. Services sector is the main element in your economy as well as in the world economy. So after international trade and international marketing, let me give you some of the other areas which are going to be affecting on your international trade. One area is very critical, that is called GATT, and I will also discuss some of the implications for Pakistan as far as GATT is concerned. The concept I explained before GATT was GATT stands for General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. It goes back to 1947. That's when it was formed. And at that time, the average tariff rate in this world was 47%. 1993, average tariff rate is about 3 to 5%. So who made it, all these things happen? Of course, GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. It's a Geneva-based organization, Geneva, Switzerland. And what's their role? Their role is that you are also a member of GATT. And they help you mutually decide. They have, so far in the last 30-40 years, they had about 5 talks. And these talks, each and every talks, ran for about 5 to 6 years. The latest talk is called Uruguay Round. And Uruguay, it started from the Uruguay. I hope the spelling is okay, because we rely too much on word perfect and sometimes we are losing this capability of spelling these things. Anyway, The Uruguay round is concluded in Geneva on December 15, 1993, and according to them, they will even try to reduce this 3 to 5% to 1 to 2%. It's a big effort, I believe. And the area behind GATT is that we should eliminate non-tariff barriers in this world. We should eliminate tariff barriers in this world. What are the tariff barriers? Tariff barriers are when you buy a Toyota, you pay 150 or 200 or 100% duty. That's a tariff barrier. If you don't have that tariff barrier, you can buy a Toyota or Honda or any car without any duty. It means as a consumer you will gain. But on the other hand, being a developing world or developing country, your country will tell you that let's not buy too many luxury items. Why? Because we are not all that rich, so we got to save our foreign exchange. So that's another issue, I will discuss it later. But the purpose of GATT is that if you are selling textiles into the US, in the US market, somebody has a quota for you. Okay? If you can sell, let's assume if you can sell 1 million items in the US market, the moment you exhausted your 1 million items, after that the US government is going to tell you stop. And after that you have no quota left. It doesn't matter if you exhaust your quota in the first month or in the three months or 6 months. Isn't it nice if there is no quota? Then you can sell all your textile production in the US, Japanese, German market. How come they have a quota for you? Because they have one thing called multi-fiber arrangement. Multi-fiber arrangement is a product of 1974. Under multi-fiber arrangement, the Western countries, they got together and they made quotas for you. And they said India has this much quota, Pakistan, China, Turkey, all these countries. A reason they wanted to protect their textile jobs. Very simple. And to some extent they are also right. Because if somebody is invading into the US market or somebody is invading your markets, you got to protect. So according to GATT, this will violate GATT rules. So they said by the year 2005, there won't be any GATT, there won't be any MFA left in this world. So you can go anywhere in the world and sell your products. But the thing is, it's going to take 9 years, 10 years. And the quota will be phased out in the next 8 to 9 years in 3 different areas, in 3 different sessions. Okay, as far as Pakistan is concerned, it's a good blessing. In layman's term, the person will say, it's great, wonderful, we will have a lot of market share. Let's get our act together and let's plan from today so that by the time we reach 2005, we will have our strategies ready. But it's not all that simple. As I said before, you live in a global world. You are not the only one selling textiles in this world. There are so many other countries selling the same technology. They have the same cheap labor and they have the same wonderful inputs. So now you know why it's so difficult. But as far as Pakistan is concerned, I believe in this area you will gain textiles and cotton. And it's a cotton group is a big group. It has textiles, garment, cotton, raw cotton, cotton waste, all these things. In some areas you will gain and in some areas you will lose. So that's why GATT, I believe, it's a good product for the world trade. Why? Because when the world trade tariff barriers are going down, as a consumer, you will consume more, somebody will buy your products all over the world, and of course there are some trade-offs. The trade-offs are, in one area you will lose, definitely. And I tell you what is that area. It's called intellectual property rights. Intellectual property rights are when you protect your patent, trademark, trade name, all these things. If you buy a Levi's in this country, it costs you about $60, $70. It comes to 900 rupees or 2000. Okay? How about if you buy, somebody sells a very cheap Levi's from Japan, it's called number 2 or imitation. You pay only maybe 100 rupees or 200 rupees. Okay, Levi's is a $5 billion corporation, they lose money, right? It's the same thing that if somebody started to sell number 2 basmati rice in the world markets, you will lose a lot of money. So this is what's happening. You buy a computer, most of the time the software will be complementary. Most of you know that here, shopkeepers, they don't charge for the software. Why it's complementary? Because we don't have any intellectual property right laws. Okay? So it means Germans, Americans, or English or Japanese, they all lose money when they sell their products because you don't pay. Look at all the singers, all the Western singers, their cassettes are also complimentary. Not complimentary, but almost very, very cheap prices. Look at all the movies, you know. Every time I come here, my brother tells me that he has seen all the movies. And my question is, that movie is still not released in the US. How come you have that movie seen? And he tells me, it's available. So what do you mean by that? Intellectual property rights. Nobody can control. And how that movie is made available in Pakistan through Middle East and other sources, although it's illegal. In the US and Western countries it's illegal. Over there also it's illegal. But the thing is, we don't have any agencies to enforce these laws. We don't have any monitoring agencies. So that's where GATT is going to help in terms of protecting your patents, legal protection, all these things. In one area, if we have three things taken care of, I believe we can also capitalize on GATT in terms of agriculture. What are those three things? Number one is manpower, number two is electricity, and number three is water. And most of you are expert in this area, so I'm not going to discuss this, but these are the three things we say in terms of any economy's prosperity. You must have these things in order to capitalize on GATT. Okay, now we have to wait and see, because one thing is very dangerous, and that is we still have 8 years to go. See, in economics and international business, we use one concept called gradualism. If you make a plan, and if the plan is going to damage some parts of your industry, you should also have some money so that you can go through that transitionary phase, 4 or 5 years. You can't implement your plans like this overnight. It will create a massive amount of inflation. Examples, China. Other example, Russia, Ukraine, all the developing countries, Central Europe. They are trying to liberalize their economies, and they believe that's the only recipe and remedy left. But look at the net effect. Within few weeks, they have a massive amount of inflation. That's a byproduct of your economic liberalization. So some people say that you must have some sort of patience. In order to implement your plans, you must have at least 3-4 years of transitionary phase. But then you must have the money to go through that phase. You may have to retrain people, you may have to relocate people, you may have to adjust your strategies. So that is a never-ending debate, but one thing is important. In order to deal with GATT, you must have some sort of transition. You must have the manpower to deal with this, you must have the money, you must have the resources, capital, and time also. All these things. So this is what happened in GATT. I told you that GATT had 4 or 5 rounds. The Uruguay round is very important, which happened on December 15, 1993. Who's going to benefit most out of the Uruguay round? To be very honest and straightforward, I believe the developed world, not developing countries, because we are a minor player in this world economy. Although we still have some market share. See, I told you the concept of comparative advantage. You can have your own comparative advantage in some areas, and nobody can steal that comparative advantage from you. Why? Because it took you time, it took you money, it took you a lot of resources. Your comparative edge, I told you, is in the form of manpower, although manpower is also losing its comparative strength, because some countries, they have a better manpower. In terms of wages, your wages are little bit higher. I'm talking about China. In China, you pay less than 25 cents. In some parts of India also. Philippines, absolutely. Bangladesh, yes. So that's why you are losing your comparative edge. But in some areas, you do have a comparative edge. That is your knowledge. Your knowledge is also your comparative edge. You see, we have a lot of brains in this country. You take any Pakistani anywhere in the world, most of the time they will be very, very successful. Why? Because we work hard when we go to other countries. But I mean, this was a point raised the other day in one of the lectures I gave, and somebody says, but we don't work hard in this country. We are wonderful we are very hard workers overseas. People who have gone to other countries, they will agree with me. Pakistanis, they work 16 to 20 hours. Why? Because it's a matter of survival. And the same thing is with your businesses. Some of your businesses are outstanding, excellent. And I will come to the export section when I will discuss the exports, why we are losing comparative edges in some areas. But one thing, and it's academic research, it's a proven research, that you cannot and you can never have a comparative advantage in each and every sector of your economy. Impossible. It will never happen. Even US and Japan, they can't have a comparative advantage in 100% of their economy, all the sectors of your economy. Why? Because there are some countries, they will be ahead of you. And comparative edge is determined by your ideas, knowledge, your brains, your capital. If you have a cheaper capital, you have a better comparative advantage. Japan's miracle growth rate in the last 30 years, not in these days, but I'm talking about 60s and 70s and 80s, thanks to their cheaper capital and thanks to some of the things which are criminally indictable in the Western societies. And those criminally indictable things are that two companies cannot get together. You violate antitrust laws. In this country, I don't know the concept of antitrust, but in other countries, if you allow IBM and Apple computers to join together, they can do that to some extent, but beyond one limit they will violate antitrust laws and you can go to jail. So that's why. But Japan, it was good because they had a comparative advantage in many areas. In one area where many Western countries, they have a comparative advantage is high tech. But in some areas, developed countries are also catching up. And I'm talking about Thailand, Malaysia. Malaysia was a net importer of all the high-tech products. Now they also export. And they not only export agriculture, but they have a well-diversified economy. So comparative advantage is extremely relevant concept in these days. And you must know your comparative advantage. And the moment you found your comparative advantage, that is your asset. Even ideas. Because when you sell your services as a consultant, this is your comparative advantage. So many Pakistanis are working as consultants in other countries and they are selling their ideas. So comparative advantage is not only in the form of tangible items, it can be in the form of intangibles when you sell services. What are the benefits? Very briefly, the benefits of GATT will be under tariff rates will come down. They will also be taking care of anti-dumping laws. Anti-dumping laws are when you sell your products below your cost. In layman's term, you can't sell your products below your cost, but in some areas you do. I give you one example. Sony Corporation is one of the top-notch high-tech manufacturer in this world. You go anywhere in the world and people will say, I need a Sony television or I need a Sony camera. Even Germans, Japanese, Americans, they all like Sony. Why? Because due to its high-tech and high-quality products. And the reason is because Sony did a very smart thing in 1970s. They did not have any market share in the American market, so what did they do? They had a new technology in those days. It's still available. It's called Trinitron, something like that. Trinitron, and they started to dump their product in the US market. How did they dump their product? They were selling below their cost. Okay, in those days the laws were not all that vigilant enough, so Sony was able to dump. It happened for a couple of years. After that, Americans woke up and they say enough is enough, stop it. Because it's illegal. Because RCA and Zenith and all the American manufacturers, most of them, they went out of business. But Sony was smart. It was called long-term strategy. Long-term strategy in what way? When you buy a product, it's a wonderful product, you don't pay too much money, but it satisfies your need. Next time, after 5 years, when you want to buy the same product, you will go back to the same brand. I'll give you one example, Toyota Corolla. You ask anybody, even kids, the first thing comes to their mind if you talk about a car, they say, I love Corolla. Why? Quality, durability, and the brand awareness is very high. Even people without any education, they will say, I like Corolla. So in these days we say it's part of your brand equity. Brands are your assets. Most of you know the concept of balance sheets. Brands do not appear on your balance sheets, but they are kind of your goodwill. If you want to buy a good shop in some good area, you will pay a goodwill. The same thing is about brand. So anytime when I say Toyota, it means it's a good car. Anytime I say Honda, it means it's a high-priced good car. So the same concept. So Sony was successful. They dumped their televisions in the American market. After that, they were penalized. But it was helpful. Now Sony is one of the best. So later on they raised their prices, and at that time people were becoming brand loyal. They knew Sony is a good product. It's a wonderful item. In world trade, and dumping is illegal. So GATT is also helpful in terms of bringing the anti-dumping laws. In many countries, if somebody wants to dump their product, they will be taken care of by GATT. One clarification. So far in the last 40 years, I told you that GATT has a very limited jurisdiction. If you don't comply with GATT rules, they can't do anything. The only thing is they will use international political pressure or moral pressure. By 1995, July 1st, 1995, the GATT names will be changed to WTO, World Trade Organization. And the reason is because GATT will have significant amount of jurisdiction. So if you don't comply with GATT rules or provisions, you may be penalized. Not as a company, but as a country. So this is the most important thing happened in the last, although Uruguay round was late by 2 years, but the thing is, it created this organization called WTO. But I told you before, we are a minor player, we are not a major player in the world economy. But we still are a very, very dynamic, export-oriented economy. And the reason I'll explain to you in a minute. So GATT provisions are changed, its jurisdiction will be completely enhanced, and the reason is because in order to make your world trade grow, you need a body which can keep an eye. You see, Americans will not be able to violate GATT rules, Japanese will not be able to violate GATT rules, Germans and us also, many other developing countries. So this is, I believe, it's a good blessing. Again, there are some losers and there are some gainers. And the thing is, places and the areas and the products where we are going to gain, we should capitalize on those areas right from today. We can't just start after 1998, because you will be amazed that by the time you reach to 1998, you will see there are so many countries ahead of you. Why? Because they are already planning. We discussing this thing yesterday. Professor Naeem Aslam invited me to deliver a talk at one of the institutes yesterday, and we had a very interesting discussion about the Japanese rice market. You must have read lately in the newspapers. The Japanese rice market, they are going to import 2% of their rice consumption this year due to the bad harvest and whatever. And GATT also forced Japan to open their rice market. Anyway, there are so many countries trying to capture the Japanese market. Who are those people? Vietnam, Thailand, and the US. Okay? And so far we haven't even done anything to negotiate, and it was only at the very first level that somebody said we have to send a delegation to Japan so that we can also have some piece of this pie. The thing is, it's a little bit late now. You should have started a couple of months ago. So all these things are part of the GATT, and GATT, I believe, is a good blessing. What else is going to happen as far as GATT is concerned? I already explained textiles. Textile industry. The world textile industry is about $248 billion. Our market share in the $248 billion textile and cotton industry, our market share is 1.6%. And I believe most of you are aware of this thing, that we are the third or fourth largest cotton producer in the world. How come we have such a small market share? And that is very interesting. You see, I told you that historically you have about 5% growth rate in this country in terms of economic growth. It's a wonderful growth rate. On the other hand, when you look at your quality of life, it's going down. Yesterday we were discussing this example. Look at the traffic in Lahore. I come here every year. Every year I see a big change. And the change is the traffic congestion and so many new cars. If you can drive a car in some parts of Lahore, I can guarantee you can drive a car in anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world.
We are already aware of it, no doubt.
Most of you have gone to States or England or wherever, and whenever you drive a car, it's very simple. It's so easy. Here, you must have the right strategy to go through this. I was watching one of your drivers brought me here. I was watching him. I believe he's a very smart guy. The way, see, there was a one traffic, railway signal, railway crossing. It was closed. So he knew how to bypass that. Believe me, he was here before 10 minutes. So it's very smart strategy. So coming back to this thing, quality of life is part of your economic prosperity. So it's a very big market and it will grow. Why? Because textile trade, different types of textile trade and cotton, it is growing in the world and it's a booming economy. So that's why we have to wait and see what happens. That's why we have to capitalize. But as far as GATT is concerned, I believe it will be a win-win strategy. It is not a win-lose strategy for us. It's a win-win. The only thing is, we got to start from today. In intellectual property rights, GATT is going to do a lot of things. It's a $60 to $70 billion market worldwide. And in this thing, I believe we will lose. Why? Because by the year 2000, we have to enforce all the laws to comply with GATT rules. So we will not be able to get all the cheap cassettes or software. So that's why I said there are gains and there are some losses.
Why do we have share in textile 1.6? Although we are fourth country or third country.
The total exports. Yeah, because the reason is our total exports are, and I'm going to discuss it in a second, our total exports are 7 billion. Okay, our total gross domestic product is $42 billion. Okay, we are almost 40 years old or 48 years old? 48. Okay, Malaysia was also like us 20 years ago, and even South Koreans came here in 1962. I still remember I was in high school or junior school in those days, and my father in those days told me that Koreans are here, and I asked him why. I was just a high schooler, I was in the 8th class, and I was just curious as a small kid. And he said because they are trying to investigate our economic plans because we are doing very good in the world economy. And look what happened, we are going back to South Koreans. We brought them to build our roads, which is called motorway. And so this is what happened, that our exports did not increase. See, one thing, in 1982, 10 years ago, your exports were only $2 billion. Your exports were only $2 billion, and in the last 10 years, you haven't seen such a big increase. I believe your exports should be more than $15 to $20 billion. Because look at your population. If you compare yourself, the population export rates, your exports should be higher than. But again, it's a never-ending discussion, and I don't want to get into that because we will run out of time. So GATT, in terms of services, they will also be helpful in terms of opening all the markets. They will also get rid of all the subsidies. You will not be able to provide subsidies to your exporters because you have to make them compete at the national or global level.
You also lose one subsidy.
I'm sorry?
You also lose one subsidy.
It is possible. It is possible. But one option of GATT is, because GATT treaty is on more than 500 pages, and one option and one provision of GATT is, if you have a balance of payment problem, most of you know what balance of payment problem is, when your exports are less than your imports, you are importing more. If you have a balance of payment, if you have a deficit problem, then they will allow you to, within certain range, they will allow you to provide subsidies. So that is a very complex, and I believe we don't have the time, but it is possible. But in some areas you will end up getting rid of all the subsidies. Very quick example here. French farmers. France is one of the worst offenders in terms of subsidies. The total European community or European Union, it's called European Union now. their total subsidies are $40 billion. And that's why Uruguay rounds were delayed, because European Union did not want to cooperate in terms of subsidies. And now they have to get rid of all the subsidies. So what happened? French farmers, every time they tried to do this thing, they were on the streets, they were smashing all the cars, destroying everything. And the first thing they did was, every time it happened, they attacked all the McDonald's restaurants in Belgium and Paris. And most of you know what McDonald's restaurant is. It's a fast food chain all over the world, more than 20,000 restaurants. So anyway,
we have talked about cheap cassettes.
I'm sorry?
We have already talked about cheap cassettes
Uh-huh.
and American films around the world.
Exactly,
Secondly, we have talked about that gag
exactly,
favors or benefits the already developed states.
sure.
And now we have talked about the elimination of subsidies. I have read somewhere
Uh-huh.
that these are the parts of the New World Order of America. Is it so that America is enforcing its New World Order around the world?
I don't know, but as I said before, we are a minor player in this world. I mean, I'm not against this country, I love this country, that's why I come here every year, sometime every 6 months, to see my parents, because these are my roots. But again, when you go at the world level, those countries, they sometimes still dictate. And they dictate in such a way that we have a very small leverage. So you are right, but in some areas, it was only between those developed world countries. The negotiations and all the things happened. In an intellectual property right, they are the main gainers, I believe. Any intellectual property right. And some of their companies lose billions of dollars. So you are right. I will not call it a new economic order, because so many times we have tried to implement this new economic order in this world, but it never happened. In these days, in the academic world, we call these strategic, not even reforms, but mostly strategies, because strategies are long-term oriented. That's why not too many people call it reforms, because reforms are short-term oriented. When you implement your reforms, and if nothing happens, if there is no visible achievement, then people say it's not a good idea. Let's call it strategies.
The second point that is perpetuating in my mind is that we have textile crisis in Pakistan.
Yes.
We keep on reading in papers, and then still there is new industry coming up in textile.
That's right.
Is it because of MFA that we are controlling the export and we are facing crisis here?
Absolutely, because MFA in the last 15 years, it did damage your industry. Why? Because labor. Okay, if you could sell something in the world market at a very competitive price, that's why you were getting a lot of market share. And we are not the only one. China, Turkey, Russia, not Russia, India, Pakistan, Burma, Bangladesh, all these countries. So MFA, I believe it did damage your textile industry, but there is no option. Why? Because you have to get along with these countries. That's why they put quotas for each and every country under the MFA.
But aren't there some specialists in the government who would advise the capitalists that they should not go for the textile industry now anymore? Because we are already having crisis because of international changes.
Absolutely.
Why won't you advise government of Pakistan? Sir.
Nobody will listen. And the reason is, I believe it's a vicious circle. When you have a vicious circle, very difficult to get out of this circle. Sometimes some of the investment happening in this country in the last 15 years, you shouldn't invest in those areas, but still there is some investment happening. It could be a political problem, or it could be a sectoral problem, very difficult.
In which field?
Textile, some industries, I believe, and see, I'm talking about from infrastructure point of view. See, in international marketing, we say that in order to become a consumer-oriented society, the first thing you got to do, before you have a middle class, the first thing, it doesn't matter whatever strategies you have, the first thing is fix your infrastructure. And most of you have a background in this area. Infrastructure is a very heavy area, very big. You must have telecommunications, you must have softwares, you must have computers, you must have roads. But the first thing, you must have a good distribution structure. And that is part of railways, airlines, roads. Roads are not the only means. You can have also inland waterways. We have a huge, I think there was some study done in the last couple of years, Indus inland waterways. It's a very, very cheap and economical area. So that's where I think we lag, and we lack some of our comparative strategies. Why? Infrastructure, if it's not developed, how can you bring your prices down? I give you one example, again going back, see, Malaysia is my very famous case study. Look at Malaysia, their infrastructure is so great. Some of you may have gone to Malaysia, although Malaysia still, they have to go a long way to get to that level where other countries are. But they have done something. And the main thing needed is long-term plan. And you must have some gradualist approach. You must also know how to go through the short term. And that's where we don't have the capital sometimes. You can't have a long-term plan without having a short-term plan. And long-term plan is based on couple of short-term plans, and then you must have the right allocation of resources. I was giving a talk other day in one of the institutions, and somebody almost had a not a fight but very big verbal argument, and he told me that all my suggestions and all my recommendations are it's another thing which happens. People come here, then they deliver speeches, and my point was somebody someday they ought to take initiative. Somebody someday they ought to plan, they ought to propose, and they ought to motivate people. But if we all blame each other and if we don't take responsibility, this is what happens, and that's why we have so much misallocation of resources. As you mentioned, you don't need this industry in some areas because cotton group is a big area. Most of your 60% of your exports are coming from cotton and rice, I believe, and it's a big area, so we have to be very careful which area we are talking about. But it's a part of misallocation.
I have two more questions to ask.
Yes, sir. Please.
First is that you talked that nobody went to Japan to negotiate. According to our knowledge, British government planned to go to Japan. Prime Minister was due in Japan,
Okay.
but he was stopped from going there.
Yeah.
Maybe because of opposition crisis or something like that.
Possible.
But it was made to know us that it was international pressure on the previous government.
Oh yes,
because
absolutely.
they raised the slogan of self-sufficiency, and
That's
nobody
right.
wanted Pakistan self-sufficient.
Absolutely.
One. Second question to my mind is dumping law. No company could afford dumping its product. As soon as the thing is ready, they would like to sell it. How could then Sony survive with lot of overheads?
Okay, dumping is possible as far as international economy is concerned. You have to be a big corporation. A small company can never afford to go for the dumping strategy. Why? If you are a big corporation, maybe for 6 months you can dump your products, and after that you can come back to the same prices. I will give you a very recent example. Minivan industry in Japan, just like your Toyota vans and all these, there's a big booming industry. It's a very good consumer product. It's called minivan. These vans you can't park in your garage, in other countries, in other households when you have a house. But the minivan is shorter and smaller. And Japan, they say Nissan is dumping their minivans in the world market, especially in the US. But the thing is, it's very difficult to prove. Why? Because there is so much complications in the dumping area. One area, foreign exchange are different, lifestyles are different, consumption patterns are different in Japan and US. And within all these perspectives, you cannot prove. Many companies, when they try to sue somebody, as far as legal remedies are concerned, they don't win. Most of the time they lose. Why? Prove. You have to prove on a scientific and legal grounds. And coming back to your first statement, I agree with you 100%. There is a lot of international political pressure. That's why I use this word, we are a minor player. We do have a very big cricket team. We are the world champions. But in economy, we are not the world champions. In some areas, we are still very good. In some areas, we are still the main champions. So you are right, it could be possible that somebody's trip was jeopardized by foreign intervention. Why? Because they don't want to lose their market share. So that's why I said when Japan allowed you to export 2% of the economy, 2% of rice, you are not the only one. There are many, many countries, even from South Asia and East Asia, they are trying to go to the Japanese market and trying to capture their market share. Yes, sir.
You mentioned of dumping restriction law.
Yes, sir.
Is it not against human rights?
Dumping laws?
Yeah. The dumping restriction restriction law because they're not allowing any company to
Okay.
sell anything at a cheaper rate.
Okay. I believe as far as human rights and human right laws are concerned, they really don't come under the dumping laws. See, as a country, you believe you can sell below your cost, or your cost is so low you can still sell at a competitive price. But when you go to the international market, you have to comply with international law. Although there is no international law, mostly you have treaties and bilateral. So it's a very tricky question. I don't know how to answer.
I would just like to add to what Dr. Tariq is saying. You said it's against human rights. 1975, if you rightly recall, we did a research study on the handicraft industry of Chennai, the woodwork industry of Chennai. And one of the findings was that there the craftsman was producing carved wooden chairs without even adding his labor cost. He was just keeping the material cost of the people. Where does human rights come and play a role there? One. That's one thing. I'm saying it happens in a lot of countries, it happens in a lot of situations. The only thing is that the man was happy that he was doing a certain amount of work. Virtually he was getting just cents out of it or pesos out of it. He wasn't even getting rupees out of it. One. Secondly, dumping should not be taken in the literal sense of the word dumping. Dumping, as the professor remarked, in terms of strategy, is something that here in Pakistan, I remember in the 60s, one of the most popular vehicles on the road, and I'm just taking an example from what you said, was Volkswagen of Germany. Everyone had a Beetle. I had 3 consecutive Beetles in my house. So everybody loved that car. It was sturdy, it was reliable, it was efficient, and very comfortable. In comes the Japanese. Now the Japanese brought in the toy, as we used to call it, that anything made in Japan was considered to be a toy. So we brought that into, I think 1966 we had the first Corona coming. Now in 66 when first Corona came in, I remember that Manu Motors, who started this thing, उन्होंने एक incentive दिया था और वो ये था कि you bring your old car, they'll give it a price, and that will be the down payment, and the rest will be on installment. And for 17,600 rupees, if I'm not wrong, you could get a Toyota Corona 1500cc car, a 4-door, 4-light car, और उस ज़माने में वो बड़ी थी. It was supposedly a luxury sedan, but still a lot of fanatic lovers of Volkswagen didn't go for it, and they still like the Beetle. But उस गाड़ी को लाने से ये हुआ कि what happened, and they started saying कि we have brought, that was the first car that had a fridge at its back. It was the first air-conditioned small car. So although they made a small car, but they gave it all the perks and privileges of a big luxury car. Now for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, they saw that. Then they changed their strategy. Volkswagen was working on an average on a 5-year cycle. You buy a Volkswagen, for 5 years you forget it. It won't do anything, any harm, and you'll be stuck with that car for 5 years. It will be performing so well, you won't think of changing. But in Toyota, they brought the life cycle down to 3 years. So 3 years the car gave you no problem, and by the time you forgot that it's only 3 years, you'll realize कि पता नहीं जी वो यहाँ पे ऑयल ख़राब मिलता है, उसकी वजह से गाड़ी ख़राब हुई, अदरवाइज गाड़ी ठीक थी. वो हमारे जी पेट्रोल में भी कचरा है, वो मोबिल ऑयल भी जाली बनता है, उसकी वजह से गाड़ी ख़राब होगी, अदरवाइज. सो यू हैव टू क्विकली चेंज योर कार. टर्न ओवर आपका क्विक हो गया. नाउ द कार दैट यू हैव, पाकिस्तान इज मेकिंग द सुजुकी Nehran, and I assure you, I've got a brand new one. I bought one. I've kept it in a condition virtually that people sometimes don't even keep a wife. But after 2 years, I tell you कि उसका दरवाज़ा खोलें और बंद करें तो you have a different sound. उसका it started rusting, although I don't even take it out in rain. I have another car, so I use that. I don't even take it out in rain, लेकिन it started rusting. You know, that's craftsmanship for you. Now otherwise the car has just done about 7,000 to 8,000 kilometers, but you know, it looks old. My father has a 1982 Corolla. उसका आज भी दरवाज़ा आप बंद करें तो it gives the same clicking sound which you used to get from a new car. So that's the difference. So you get addicted, you get habituated, and once, they call it a sales pitch. They're not forcing you to buy. वो उनका एक program आता था. Remember that always, inverted commas. You ask for it. You're paying for it. Why do you buy Sony? Don't buy Sony. Be Pakistani, buy Pakistani. लेकिन फिर you'll go in for that, and you go in now. The Suzuki Khyber presently costs, factory price is about 250,000 rupees, and for 270,000 rupees you can get a GL Corolla 86 reconditioned. People go for that, not for the Khyber. The Suzuki Big, वो जो मरगला है, डिगी वाली, costs 3,70,000. You can go in for an 8990, the new shaped Corolla, reconditioned GL power steering, 16 valve engine, and assembled in Japan for the same price. You go for that, you don't go for Suzuki Margla made in Karachi. So they're not here, they're not telling you to buy your car. We go, when we see the comparisons, when we see the alternatives, we opt for it. So dumping के इससे ज़्यादा जो है, look at it from this point of view that people are being made to use the product, and as Dr. Tariq said, in case the product gives you the satisfaction or service that you so desire, why shouldn't you have it? I'm saying we make the best textiles in Pakistan, we make the best cloth in Pakistan, but we have one problem, we can't stitch it. I still love to say I've got a St. Michael place, something I wanted all my life, and I still go, I'll go and buy another blazer whenever I go to England. Why? Because of its stitching. Lawrenceburg makes better cloth, we can't stitch it. Let's face it. Improve your stitching, you won't go.
There was one question on the other side. The main question that I was asking that if we require and we are restricting the buyer, is it not violation of human rights because a man has the right to assess for better economic condition if he is getting the benefit in the shape of lesser price, and we are restricting that man that we should buy at a higher price. Keeping that in view, is it not against?
To some extent it is.
Yes.
But one thing, in international community, how do you prove? That's the most important thing.
The proof is this, that you are restricting that company that he shouldn't sell the thing at this price. This is a proof.
See, the problem is, in international trade, they don't mix two things, human rights and economic.
They don't mix business with pleasure.
Exactly. So I agree with you 100%. But the thing is, when you are the main plaintiff, then you have to prove not on the basis of your opinion, but on the basis of scientific grounds and scientific data. And that's where we don't know what to do. And that's where we mostly lose. So your point is valid and well taken, but that's the problem. Yes, sir.
As you have said that personal grade and greater than quotas on cotton and textile.
Okay.
So I think this year Pakistan may have to vote cotton.
Oh yes. As this gentleman mentioned, the problems
The
are
problem is that the virus disease
exactly.
so smashed
Exactly.
Pakistan.
You see, coming back.
I argue that this came from the virus.
Absolutely. I'll tell you.
This is not a joke.
I'll tell you one example.
And scientists said that they will take 1 or 2 or 3 years.
Exactly.
to overcome this disease.
Sure.
And in the next year, they and second wave.
Okay. Let me make a very quick analogy here. And the analogy is, in 1800, early 1800, the USA was dependent on agriculture. As far as its GDP is concerned, 60% of the GDP was coming from agriculture. In 1992, total GDP as far as agriculture is concerned is only 2 to 3%. So it means they have expanded their industrial base. This is what I was talking about when I indirectly mentioned, coming back to your point, that we got to have some sort of exports where those exports are coming from your industrial base. Today you have a bad crop, you go back to square one. And again everything is all flopped, everything. So that's one of the problems we have. If today we have a crisis, your industries will still stay there. They will still produce, you will still export. But if you are relying too much on agriculture, I believe that as far as Pakistan is concerned, in the long run, it's a very dangerous strategy. Although we are one of the best producers in terms of cotton, quality and quantity and all the things. But how do you deal with the natural impediments? We have no solution for that. Why? Because in some areas we are not the main efficient producer. And in order to reach to that point, it takes a lot of hard work. And see, we have the brains and resources. We don't know how to implement. That's where we lack. And most of you know that 60, and in Western world also, anytime when you plan, 60% of the plans or 50% of the plans you cannot implement. Sometimes you cannot achieve 100%. So this is what happens. You can make any strategy on this piece of paper.
But all the scientists are doing that. I met many of them.
Yes.
They said that virus came from that.
It's possible. It's possible. I don't know about the exact details, but it is possible.
Sir, your lecture is opening up many horizons.
Oh, absolutely.
3 years back, I studied it somewhere that Japanese has suggested tripolar system in the world.
Yes.
One is European market, the other is America, the third is Japan.
Japan.
Now we have, and at that time Japan was on top.
That's
now
right.
you just mentioned that its economy is going to ruin.
Exactly.
I conclude that European market and Americans, they have joined hands against an Asian country. Is it so, sir?
Possible, because Europeans, especially Americans, they have a hard time getting along with Japan. Most of you know, when you read the history, Hiroshima and all these things, although Japanese are wonderful, but they also don't, you see, it's very, one thing I tell my students, and I think most of you will agree, you feel wonderful when you win, right? You feel horrible when you lose. And not too many people, not even our parents, our coaches, our media, our culture, in the Western society, over there also, they don't tell us how to lose. They only tell us how to win. I mean, if your cricket team is going to lose, the whole country is going to mourn, right? And of course, hockey is already history. Because I used to play hockey, they are not the number one in these days. So that's why we don't know how to lose, but we only know how to win. So when you win, you come home, your parents will, they will say Shabas and this and that, and they will say, Inshallah, you will repeat. Also encourage when you lose, because you cannot be the main winner all the time. Win-win strategy is very difficult. Someday you will lose, and we don't know how to go through that stage. I mean, sorry for the bad language, but this is what the reality is. It's irrational. Yes, sir.
Do you think that we should drift from agricultural sector and try to develop industrial sector?
Yes.
To compete in the world?
That's what I explained. The industrial base needs to be diversified.
But sir, my question is really an answer.
Yes.
I put you this question because you are sitting at the global level.
Yes,
you
sir.
see you are looking at the world with a bigger horizon than myself or than many Pakistanis here. My question was, do you also conceive the same thing which I have just concluded in my mind? That American and European countries, they have joined hands against Asian countries.
Oh yes, sir. Absolutely.
They are trying to make tripolar system there.
Okay.
It was suggested by Japan.
Okay. But now I got your question. Let me answer now. 4 years ago it was correct, 5 years ago. But things in the last 2 years, they have changed, and now they have a new, it's not an economic order. Americans and Europeans, now they themselves are talking about one thing, and that is called Asian century. They say that most of the foreign direct investment will happen in Asia. And those countries, I'm talking about South Korea, Taiwan, India, Pakistan, all these countries. And they say that, coming back to your statement, they had a tripolar world. But the way things have changed in the last 3 years, why? Number one, there is no Cold War left. Although there are a lot of little bitty Cold Wars, those are the byproducts of your Cold War. You see, in 1960s, 70s, 50s, 80s, you had two main competitors, okay? You could predict their strategies, you could predict their games, but in today's war, which is called economic war, you cannot predict your competitors, you cannot figure out your competitor's strategy. In Cold War, it was very easy because everything was visible. In economic war, everything is not visible, and that's where the main problem is. So you had a tripolar concept, and that concept was before the Soviets have a free enterprise system, which we have, although it has its drawbacks. So within that perspective, things are changing, and now they themselves are going to Asia and they are investing. In the next 5 years, according to one estimate, they plan to invest 20 to 30 trillion dollars in the Asian countries, and there are a lot of Asian countries. So they say the main economic boom will happen in these Asian countries. So where do we stand as a Pakistan? I think you should also try to capture some of the foreign direct investment. But if I bring my $100 million, do you think I need long-term security if I invest here? Absolutely. That's the main problem. So that's my answer. And Americans are very smart, Japanese are very smart, Germans are very smart, but they also make mistakes. We believe they don't make mistakes. It's not true. They also make mistakes, and I think we are also very smart. But the thing is, we are not recognized.
We make no mistakes.
And we make no we make no mistakes. Let me help you understand the last part of this lecture very briefly. How do you elevate your exports? Continuing, this part of your question. How do you elevate your exports? I told you that our exports are $7 billion. Our total exports are $7 billion. 10 years ago, your exports were $2 billion. As far as I'm concerned, as an academic, I believe your exports should be more than 15 billion. I mean, look at your population, huge country. Your exports should go beyond 15 billion. And what are the things we can do to elevate our exports? I believe we need to make some major structural changes. What are those structural changes? Trade liberalization. Invite more foreign capital. There are some drawbacks, no doubt about it. Everybody will agree when you invite a multinational, they will also need to have some benefit. But in today's world, as I said, it's an economic world. You got to sacrifice and you have to have some trade-off. You can't just have 100% profit and you tell outside investors, get out of here. You see, you cannot isolate yourself. You live in a global world which is highly, highly interdependent. You can never isolate yourself. If nobody buys your rice, what do? If nobody buys your cotton, the whole economy will collapse. Although $7 billion is not a big deal, but it should go beyond. What are the structural things I'm talking about? I think we should start from ground zero. Most of you are engineers. In these days, in the Western world, there is a new concept. It's called re-engineering. Re-engineering. We borrowed this concept from you people. You are the technical people. But in business, I'm a business professor. In business, we used your language, we used your terminology, and we called it re-engineering. Re-engineering is, let's start from ground zero. If you have a system, bring down all the barriers. Okay? Fire everybody. Get rid of all the problems. Let's start from ground zero. How can you apply this re-engineering concept to your export department? I believe you should start from ground zero and start to structure your export department. You can have a separate export department, separate division, or like other Asian countries, if the exports are going to go up, I believe you may have a separate ministry. You can have a separate ministry, although it's not going to happen in the next 4 or 5 years, because you can't have the separate ministry overnight. It needs lot of changes. It's going to take at least 3 years to make a new separate ministry. But again, that's not the only remedy. If you don't have the money, maybe try to reorganize your export are not productive. So this is what I'm talking about, re-engineering. The second thing, more trade liberalization. In order to capitalize on this Asian century or economic boom which is happening in world today, or consumer convergence or international consumer convergence, you should try to fix your infrastructure. You can never have a middle class, you can never have a consumer-oriented society without having the right infrastructure. And I believe most of you agree with me because that's your area. And I'm talking about water also, I'm talking about energy. How do you fix that? I don't have any answer. I only come here once a year. Most of you know what are the problems, what are the impediments. But that's where, see, any country you go to, economic prosperity doesn't come to you on its own. You have to create your own economic prosperity. Markets never come to you. You have to create your own markets. Once markets are lost, that's the main problem. The third thing which I have, and it's part of the whole ball game, and that is, try to understand your competitors. You can also learn from your competitors. It's called benchmarking. Benchmarking is, If you are making mistakes, what you do? Learn from your competitors. In the Western world, they have one thing called benchmarking clearinghouses. Benchmarking clearinghouses are, you collect data from different companies, and then as a consumer you go to that clearinghouse. That's a data bank, huge data bank, and you try to capitalize or you try to imitate somebody's technology. But you see, imitation 100% will not help. Japanese are smart historically. They have been the most creative imitators. See, we are also wonderful in terms of imitation. But Japanese are smart, they do creative imitation. They are not the main innovator of VCR, but they have the biggest market in the world. They are not the main innovator of robots. They are the biggest exporter of robots. And there are so many products. Akio Morita, who's the chairman, he's sick in these days, but who's the chairman of Sony Corporation, he went to the US in 1960s and he bought, for $60,000, he bought the transistor from Bell Laboratories. And Americans thought this transistor is not going to be a big deal. Well, he bought it for $60,000 and look what happened. Rest is all history. Sony invented your transistor. Later on, they went back to the chips, and now chips are the most important area, the semiconductor I'm talking about. So that is all called creative imitation, which is part of benchmarking. You can learn from your imitators or your competitors. Chinese are very good. Taiwanese are also very smart in terms of creative imitation. And that's where we can elevate our exports. You should eliminate some of your non-tariff barriers. Some of the non-tariff barriers are part of your corruption. And then you should also diversify your industrial base. And going back to the question which was just raised, industrial base is going to help you survive. See, we are wonderful in terms of making speeches. You read all the newspapers, excellent articles, well written, every week we read. But when it comes down to implementation, that's where most of the time we fail. Final comments, my final thoughts, some food for action, some food for later discussion, and that is, you live in a global world, you live in an economic world. Things are going to change so fast in the next 5 years. Believe me, by the year 2000, see, every country is trying to compete. Every country is trying to launch their products and commercialize. If you don't get your act together, I think you will be left behind. And as far as our population is concerned, we have a lot of brains. We have the right people. We have cream of the cream. Your people work for some top corporations. But we are not productive here. Why not? Because our system needs to be changed. And exports are the main area. If you don't have a good exports this year, the whole system will collapse. I believe your exports should go beyond $15 billion in the next 4 or 5 years. How do you achieve that objective? Some of the recommendations I made, although these recommendations are great on this piece of paper, but we need to implement also, and that is long-term security. If you have a long-term security, somebody will invest here. If you don't have a long-term security, we will still be at the same stage. You see, I told you, $2 billion 10 years ago, it's a peanut. It's not a big number. And 7 billion. It should have been more than 15 billion. Even Malaysia, their exports are more than us, although Malaysia is a very small country. Malaysia is the size of this northwest province, even smaller than that. So we have the resources, and you, believe me, some of the friends I know, you have some top-notch medical doctors in the US from Pakistan. You also have some top-notch engineers. Where did they go to school? They go to school here in Punjab or Karachi. Top-notch engineers working for top-notch companies. Why are they so smart? Because we people are smart. But the thing is, we fight a lot. And that's one of the problems. So diversification is important in terms of industrial base. And these are my final comments, and at this time I open this floor for your discussion. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Normally, these days, when the hunger is striking at the doors of the third world, like African countries, these developed nations like France and USA, they are keeping their breastband out of protection. To me, they are very honest that when they are in their country, and they are very dishonest when they are dealing overseas. So why you should worry about GATT, WTO, and enter into agreements
Okay. As I said before, GATT, I 100% agree with you, things were different before. But after 1995, the whole world is converging, it's not diverging. So when you have so much jurisdiction provided to WTO, it doesn't matter if you are from America or if you are a French company or if you are from Japan, you have to comply. So that's why the whole world is converging. So within that scenario, I believe you are looking at some sort of global economic activity. So that's why we have to comply. And as I said, we have 8-9 years for the implementation. We have to start right now. Because if we just keep waiting, that's a very scary thought. So that's my answer. Yes, sir.
Keeping the pragmatic oriented approach, whether WTO will be able to take action against America?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
The consequence will be America.
yes, it doesn't matter. Because when you have provided, and America is also one of the member countries, when you have provided jurisdiction to somebody, like United Nations. See, United Nations in the last 40 years was not successful. Look what's happening in the last 3 years. To some extent they are successful. Why? Because in some areas,
Actually, sir,
in some areas.
After Russia, USSR,
Yes.
the role of UN has minimized.
Yes.
The monetary institutions like IMF, GATT and IBRD, Americans have definitely spearhead there.
Absolutely.
And I assure you, these three agencies will not be able to protect America of enforcing its own order.
Yes. In some areas it has happened. It has happened that GATT, you see, who opened the Japanese market? GATT. Who opened the Japanese market in semiconductors? Who opened the Japanese rice market? GATT. Who is trying to harmonize the intellectual property rights? It was GATT. So things are changing. That's why my prediction is that the next 4 or 5 years are very, very critical to any economy, especially economy like us, because we are a very, very very dynamic export-oriented economy. So if we can forecast and if we can capitalize some of the strategies available, I think we should. That's why I said, see, we are diverging a lot. It's a time to converge. As far as
I read a book on Gulf War in 1990. It was written by our military academy Khartoum. Whatever I read there, Americans with the alliance of their allies had won the war against Iraq.
Yes.
So they then studied the world order, what would the world would look like after the fall of Iraq, and as a matter of fact the iron railings, iron curtains of Russia.
Sure.
So now from your lecture I conclude the world is really converging and America is coming out like a policeman. And as the Premier Secretary General, he commented after the Gulf War that unless we are going to have another policeman as powerful and as tall as the Americans are, the UN will not play any role in the future.
Yes.
So you have proved this point exactly what I have concluded from your enlightened and very good lecture. So is this that America is emerging?
Okay. My lecture was mostly on economic trade and international trade. I agree with you. In some areas, they are the policemen. But in some areas, I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about economics. But again, in the future, economics and politics, which you mentioned, will be merging together. Because now you have no Cold War left. So how can you run an economic war without a political war? It will happen. But there are so many checks and balances being developed at the world level, including WTO after 1995, that I think some of the things will change. You see, who's getting rid of all the MFA restrictions? GATT did. So after 10 years, there won't be any restriction in the world market. I believe it's a good sign. But again, as I said, there are some gainers and there are some losers. In this area, you can never have a win-win strategy. There will be some gaining countries and there will be some losing countries. And if we know our comparative edge as far as the gaining strategies are concerned, we can still capitalize. But as far as politics is concerned, of course, that's the biggest economy of the world, $5 trillion. They have the power, they have the pride, and they have the prestige. This is my famous formula, 3 Ps. Power, prestige, and pride corrupts people.
to be very honest.
Actually, they have their own team, police.
Yes.
In this region, they thought India should act as a policeman. In the Middle East, they thought that Israel should act as a policeman. So it is happening, and economically also it is happening.
Yes.
And Pakistan, I talk of my country, we can't fix our own tariff of electricity. It is IMF who is forcing our country to fix this rate per unit of electricity. Similarly, they are forcing us to fix railway fares and something like that.
That's
So
right.
IMF, GATT, GATT and other, I think these were the parts of long-term strategy of America.
To some extent, you are right, but in some areas, I don't think so. See, it's a never-ending discussion.
Even to be Prime Minister,
Sure.
when trying.
Sir, this was really part of IMF. He's right. He's right.
Yes.
ये जो मोइन कुरैशी साहब आए थे ये IMF का हिस्सा थे उन्होंने he played his role very smartly and very efficiently जैसे मैंने कहा कि हमने हमारी किसी गवर्नमेंट ने किसी लीडर ने गलती से ये कहा खुद एतमादी खुद इन्हिसारी जापान जाना चाहते थे वो दौरा होने नहीं दिया गया really
Because there was some foreign pressure. But the thing is, our politicians also, they fight a lot. There is so much political corruption in this country. If you can get rid of that element, I believe you will improve a lot. How can you get rid of that political corruption?
Sir, Norman
I don't have a, I'm sorry?
Norman fail नहीं होने लगा हमारे पास
Someday, somewhere, I think you will gain in some areas. But if we keep fighting, it's pretty dangerous. Because nobody is going to protect you. As I said, Cold War, if you are somebody's ally, they will protect you. In economic war, nobody is going to protect you. And that's the most dangerous thing. Because they don't have any incentive left to protect you. Because there is no Cold War.
China, is it on plus deficit with America in trade?
Yeah, I will say it's a 50-50 because in the last 2 days the Americans they have blasted China in terms of their textiles. So they may lose 2 billion of their textiles, 2 billion worth of their sales. America, I think in the Reagan era was very close to China. Things are changing. Mr. Clinton is not all that close to China. Sure. Thank you.